Good morning. I want to talk about the computer solicitation statutes that a lot of states have. I also want to pose some questions out there in the community. So let me start with a question. If you knew that innocent people were nailed as a part of an attempt to protect children, uh, and that they were arresting instead of the people actually harming children, they were arresting other people, would that bother you? I really want to ask that of the troll community. Does that bother you that innocent people are being nailed? Now, I understand that the argument is, you folks like, Norman Michaelation and many others, whose story I've told, you want to call us names because your attitude is we were caught doing something and therefore we must be guilty. Well, and that's why we're fighting back. Now, it never occurs to you, apparently, that people who have been innocent and who have a lot of fight in them and who are outraged at police overreach and the abuse of the Constitution, the abuse of public trust by saying that children are being exploited by these people and we have to stop these people, that somehow that doesn't count into your equation. So I just want to ask you, isn't it possible that people are upset and outraged because police are misusing statutes in order to gin up statistics? And again, you don't have to look at me, you don't have to believe me, you can look at it yourself. I've given you enough of a lead time and enough pointing to documentation that if you want to do your homework, and many of you don't, you just want to call names, so you can go ahead and do that. You can look up the I.C.A.C statutes. You can look up their policies and procedures. You can look up what they do at their training sessions. You can look up their federal grants, and you can see that they're tied to results. If you've ever done a federal grant, as I said, it's tied to specific benchmarks, specific goals, and specific results. Otherwise, you don't continue to get money. However, there is one situation where you might, if you can appeal to the public enough or appeal to a political group enough, where they end up throwing money at you because they say, here, go solve our child predation problem. And so I posed before, can't we solve any issue involving exploitation of children and at the same time safeguard constitutional rights? And it's really strange how what I keep hearing is, no, you really can't. You only can do one or the other. And so we go for child exploitation, which is fine, except I want you to remember something. When you empower the police and give them a blank check or give them an unlimited set of resources with an unlimited mandate, every single time without exception, they go over the line. Every single time. Okay? We've seen it over and over and over again where police will take that and go right up to the line and a little bit over it until the courts or the public say, enough, enough. And we even have cases where the rare moments where platforms, particular websites push back, as Facebook did against the Memphis police some 10 years ago or so. The police fought them tooth and nail. They would not leave Facebook's platform. They finally had to come to an agreement where the Memphis Police Department said, we won't make this official. It's official. Actually, we won't allow this. We'll make it our official policy to say that we don't do this. But that's not exactly saying we won't continue to do it unofficially. So the police are going to continue to push back on this. And why? Because this creates such great results and make them look like such great guys all the time. And again, I'm not anti-police. I'm not pro-child abuse. I'm explaining to you that as far as I'm concerned, as far as many of us are concerned, you don't have to be a victim of these things. If police got a warrant, if they had probable cause, if they weren't running very dangerous, sketchy, proactive stings. And I say dangerous because, yes, it's not just dangerous against people like me, it captures a lot of people and destroys a lot of lives of citizens needlessly and doesn't protect children as they claim. Okay? They keep saying that they do. But when you ask them for the stats, they don't produce the stats. So if the stats were out there and they were obvious, they'd be crowing about it. So all of this I've put together in prior videos. Let's talk about the computer solicitation statute and some of the sketchier ways it's being used. And first, let's look at the other side of it. Whether you're talking about Operation Underground Railroad out west, or you're talking about Carlos Rodriguez and his net nanny operation, which comes directly from that, we're going to be telling that story sometime. Whether you're talking about the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which originated here in Virginia in Bedford County, you're talking about a link up of resources and capabilities of people who are also slipping over to the vigilante side, or you could say the independent non-accredited law enforcement side, if you want to be generous, of people who want to go out there and pretend like they're rescuing children. And very often what we're finding is that these people, and including the rogue vigilantes who just self-appointed themselves to go after people, those people too have sketchier pasts than the people that the computer solicitation statute are getting. Whether you're talking about Detective Robert M. Bauer of the Fairfax Police Department, who went after me, see Bauer v. Merchant case, whether you're talking about Carlos Rodriguez, whether you're talking about the weirdity in the Utah Attorney General's office, where they at one point were protecting Tim Ballard and company. It is very, very strange what's going on the other side. And if you really concern children about protecting those who are innocent and vulnerable, you want to look at it on their side because they're the actual abusers. They're the actual people who are hurting kids. And they're doing it under the cover of protecting kids. And again, if you're a pedophile, the perfect place to be is to harm someone in this kind of environment. That's a perfect place to be. And I only throw that word out there, which I find offensive because it's non-descriptive, because it's thrown out a lot, because you guys throw it out. Some of you throw it out. So if you're really concerned, you're going to look at the other side. So I posted, for example, the Washington Post report, their series of police officers coming after children and having sex with them over a 17-year period, multiple times a week, every week, 52 weeks in a year over a 17-year period. And we still have cases of these coming up over and over again. You hear a lot about, endlessly, about the Catholic Church and about the Boy Scouts, etc., but you don't hear as much about the police as often. And eventually I'm going to get back around to looking at individual cops and what they endure. And their penalties are all over the map, but on par in many cases, they are lesser charges, lesser sentences than people like me, who never had any sort of pre-existing condition or pre-determination to go after children. What's interesting too is that they want to make us, people like me who are in positions of trust with children as teachers, they want to make examples of us. But they don't seem to do that with police in the same way, or others, probation officers and others. So in that framework, let's look at the computer solicitation statute. Basically, it says that police are allowed to charge you with using a computer or electronic billboard, which is an old term, electronic device, an iPhone, something like that, in order to groom children online with the purpose of meeting them and having sex with them. That's basically it. And you would think, though, that case after case, excuse me, case after case, you would have cases where there is clear evidence of sexual talk all the time with minors, and there isn't a lot of that. Because first of all, most of the time there's not minors having these conversations. Okay. Yes, I'm sure you can find cases where there are, but mostly they're not. So they're fishing expeditions. They're not reactive stings where mom calls in and says somebody's creeping on my kid. That's a reactive sting. These are proactive stings where police are hanging out there, and they don't just sit there and wait as they claim, because that's the other part of it. It's highly sketchy if police, the more they insert themselves into the process instead of waiting for something to happen, the more likely it's sketchy, the more likely the person is innocent. Because if you're sitting out there waiting for it to happen, and you have to bring up sex. Hey, you want some sex? Hey, I'm 24. I'm a mom, and then in some hundred messages, oh, I have some daughters that I also am interested in you meeting, or whatever the case is. If you keep doing that, that creates a problem. Okay, that creates a huge problem. Why are you doing it? That's one of the questions I have. If child exploitation is everywhere and you can swing a dead cat and be in a position to rescue children, why are you trying so hard to create something that wasn't that way to begin with? Why are you doing that? And if you are going to do that, why aren't you just sitting back and waiting for it to happen? Because you know it's going to happen, right? According to you in the police department, why don't you do that? Well, I suspect it's because it's not happening that way. We suspect that it's not happening that way, and we have more than anecdotal evidence. We have specific patterns. So I've already talked about police enter a website, they create a profile in violation of the terms of service of that particular website. The terms of service is part of contract law, as I understand it, and contract law does not allow you to violate the contract. You're not a user. You're not allowed on there. In fact, specifically, it says government agents are forbidden to be on there. So why aren't platforms protecting citizens, their users, subscribers, their paid subscribers? Why aren't they protecting these people? Okay. And more we're getting around to that. We're talking about how they're not helping to protect children online, that they're not policing their sites online well enough. Okay. And we have seen in a couple of cases where they have gone after police when they haven't been authorized. So we can only assume if they're not going after police who are operating on there, either they don't know it, which I find unlikely, or they are happy to get some free policing. Maybe that's what they're doing. We have reached out to a number of these sites over the years in their legal departments, and as high as a vice president and president level, we have gotten no response at all. And no response seems to me quite telling. So, this is a wonderful playground then for police and other bad actors on here to play games. And again, as I've already indicated, sometimes the police and the vigilantes and the predator catchers, they have a far sketchier situation in their personal lives than people like me. Far sketchier. I had never had a felony before. I don't smoke marijuana. I don't smoke at all. I drink very sparingly. Okay. I've never been in trouble with the law. The worst I've had is speeding tickets and an ugly court battle for custody of my daughter well before any of this had ever happened. And only gone to the court to try to get the court to enforce the violations, the divorce decree, and the child visitation agreement that my ex-wife was violating. And that's how I've learned very early on, before anything happened in 2018, just how the courts work. And that's one of the things I'm detailing in my book. All right, so the computer solicitation statute allows them to use this and come on and pretend like you are soliciting. Okay. Now they're not doing it with a reactive tip. They're not doing it just sitting out there and waiting for something to happen. They're actively participating, baiting, pushing, pressing, cajoling, okay, nudging you into it. And the question is, it's many of you are saying, well, that's fine with us. We're okay with that, right? As long as they're protecting children. But think about this for a minute. Why are they doing that? Why are they so desperate to capture people? Well, they got to get up those numbers. Those numbers have to increase, or they won't get their grants and they won't have much to show for it. And of course, the statistics, that's another issue I've talked about, where they conflate their statistics, they push them together with other sorts of things. We know that if they arrest you and there are children that you have in the house, or small children, they say, oh, we rescued the children. Okay. Of course, you didn't molest your own children, so you're probably not going to go out and molest other children. But that doesn't matter to them either on that. These things are not troubling to police. All they have to do is make an argument before a court. And if you lose at the lower level court, you basically lost. Okay. And with entrapment cases for sex, very rarely resulting in some kind of a mistrial or something being thrown out. Uh, Motion to dismiss on or suppression of evidence similarly are pushed out. And again, this is anecdotal, but I want I put it out there to the people listening. Show me all the cases where entrapment on a sex charge has been thrown out in the last 50 years. I want to see all those cases where they've been thrown out because there are not very many, and I've watched a lot of these cases for a long time. Can't watch everything. I'm sure you can find some cases, but you're not going to find as many cases as we have where they have been ignored, sidelined, laughed out of court because judges simply don't want to take it up. It's a sex charge. And remember, judges get a report card. And the more it says right in the report, at least in Virginia, if you hammer somebody, particularly on the most egregious charges like murder or sex charges against children, you get a gold star, and that looks good to you. So judges are already incentivized not to look favorably on any kind of legal niceties or certainly not the Constitution or the Fourth Amendment, which they have trounced over and over again. So again, you're looking at computer solicitation as a very kind of ooky tool, a very suspect tool, so squishy that police can use it in just about any way, and up and down the line, they're allowed to get away with it. Now, again, I'm not talking about, if you have a picture of somebody, doing something to a kid. I'm not talking about where you have sexualized talk. That's another issue in dealing with role play issues and dealing with other things online. Not to mention the fact that yes, it does happen. Okay, but most of the time it doesn't. And the use of the computer solicitation statute allows police to abuse people right and left, and there's zero accountability. Zero accountability. I've heard from some of you, oh, the police themselves, they have policies and procedures. Of course, they had policies and procedures not to beat people to death, not to create asphyxiation, not to do no knock warrants and other sorts of things, and they did it anyway. Okay? I mean, just because they have a policy and a procedure doesn't mean anything really. It just means that they have fair warning that police are not supposed to behave in this way, and still they dive behind qualified immunity. And often, although that is changing a bit, often they lose unqualified immunity in cases where the behavior is particularly egregious, but I would argue too where it is publicized in an open forum, like the George Floyd case over 2 years, and many others, Breonna Taylor and others, where it's just so beyond the pale. Although I think in Breonna Taylor's case, the police actually got off in that. Um, in the online solicitation cases, police benefit from the hidden world of online, the digital world, the hidden world where nobody sees it. It's not out in the open. You don't have pictures and everything. So you rely on text messages and things which are heavily edited, sometimes are contextualized, and you need to see it too. You need to hear it, you need to see it, you need to engage all your senses, and you can't do that all the time when you're looking at a video or where you're reading a transcript. And that's why in other cases these cases are thrown out sometimes because the video doesn't tell the whole story. The transcript doesn't tell the whole story. You have the context. But in sex cases, it only has to tell enough of the story so that some judge can say, well, beyond a reasonable doubt, and you know that that's been exploited because in cases such as mine, there's been plenty of doubt. There's been plenty of doubt. There have been no pictures that should have incriminated me. Okay. There's one picture, as I said, I initially thought I sent to one person, but there's significant evidence that it was placed into an account after I requested that underage account be deactivated. Okay. And you don't have any sexualized talk. And when I went to meet the person, then there was nothing in the car. And remember, these are the elements of conviction that starts with the computer solicitation statute It starts earlier than that, actually setting you up by setting up a fake profile, violating the terms of agreement thereof, therefrom, and starting out talking about adult conduct, pretending to be an adult, abruptly switching to a child. If you don't immediately disengage, we come after you. If you express shock, amazement, etc., there are people on here who say, well, you should have engaged. Well, there's nothing that says in the law that you can't try to help somebody. And even though I've been laughed at for that, that's honestly what I was trying to do. And it's easy to Monday morning quarterback on all these cases. But what I'm asking you is, isn't it fair also to think maybe some of these people are innocent? Some of these stories I've been telling you about people's cases, maybe police are abusing this particular statute after all. So I want you to think about that. I want you to just think about how possible it is that there are innocent people. And don't forget the many children out there who, when police are over here looking in this direction, something is actually happening over here. And they know it's happening in places, but they're spending their time ginning up statistics over here and not so much over here. And how do we know this? Because very rarely do you see a press release where they said, yes, based on a sting on the deep web or the dark web, we did this. No, it's always computer solicitation on an adult platform. That's where they gin up their statistics. That's where they get most of them. And then from there, they play games with how they count children saved. They play games with, how many children are actually saved. They refuse to come clean with all their statistics. And if they had glowing results, they would be crowing from the rooftops. They would be here, let me show you. And they'd be putting it out there like they do when they do a drug run or something, and they not drug run, excuse me, a drug sting, and they have all the ammunition and all the guns and all the piles of drugs, and they have it all laid out on tables. They'd be doing that here, but they don't. They ask you to believe them, and all I'm asking you to do is look at them with the same degree of skepticism that you want to look at some of us. Because as some of you have discovered, looking at some evidence that I have begun to lay out there, it's a little bit more nuanced and subtle than you may think. This is Norman Michaelation for the 23rd of September, 2024. I hope you have a good day.